In the end times, there will be a one world currency. So, let's go, not a quote. Okay, there's a few there. Misquote. A few there. Part quote. Nobody. Interprequote. There we go. Interprequote has come into its own. This is someone's interpretation of Scripture. And the reason we want to touch on this one, and we'll dig into this in particular, but quite often, what somebody has interpreted Scripture to say can, in our minds, become as true as Scripture. So, this one is an example of, we know that in the end times, sorry, I don't want to jump into where you're going with this, but
Hey, no problem.
we know that no one will be able to buy or sell unless they take the mark of the beast. Now, in past years, people have gone, well, that's only possible if somebody controls the currency. It's only possible. So therefore, there must be a one world currency. The Bible doesn't say that. It might be the case, but we need to be very careful we don't make that into that. Because actually, it's entirely possible now with technology, the way it is, that you don't have to have a one world currency to control the means of buying and selling everything. It doesn't have to happen now. So we need to be very careful that whenever anyone talks about a one world currency, that we take that as an interpretation, not Scripture. Does that make sense? Yes. There's another one very tied up with that, when that would be the one world government. Do you want to speak into that one?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if I can throw back to where it comes from, with the late 1700s and revivals that took place, and books obviously being available in a way that they weren't before, there started to be a large number of people who wrote commentaries. And there was a guy called J.N. Darby who was involved with the Plymouth Brethren. And he had a friend called Schofield who published the Schofield Bible. And the Schofield Bible was basically J.N. Darby's theology. And then moved in his commentary was sort of chopped up and dropped into a study Bible, if you like. And, you know, it has a lot going for it, but a lot of things that have since been proved to be pure interpretation and outdated. And of course, that's the problem. I think as Christians, we love novelty. We love the new. So somebody comes along with a new insight. We'll listen to it and go away, oh, that was brilliant. I'd never heard that before. You with me? And that we should recognize as, you know, it might mean the person's a very good speaker, and it might mean the person's got some great ideas. But we can't take what preachers say is gospel when they're speaking outside the authority of Scripture. Just full stop. We have got to discern, and we've got to weigh these things up. I remember when I was a kid, you know, a teenager, late great Planet Earth book came out by Hal Lindsey. Yeah. And Hal Lindsey was dogmatic that communism was going to be, you know, one of the players in the end time, the King of the North, revived Roman Empire. And there's a whole pile of interpretive stuff in there. And of course, communism doesn't exist. And then you've got to say, well, hang on, but he was an American speaking within a time when the fear of communism was so large and it motivated people. And I guess it was a bestseller. Why? Maybe not just because it was about the end times prophecy, but it was because it was speaking to America's deepest fears. if you understand. And I think it was an important book because it sort of sowed the seed for all sorts of other people doing another version of Late Great Planet Earth. You know, and I know there was before him, but he popularized it in a way so it wasn't like theology books. It was the paperback book that everybody read. And then the Left Behind series came along and essentially took Late Great Planet Earth and chopped bits out that hadn't worked and put other bits in. And these books can be very helpful. You know, they can give you a sense of urgency. They can give you a sense of, yeah, the Lord is coming back. And they create possible scenarios of what might happen in the book of Revelation when it is outplayed on earth. But they're just scenarios. And the danger, as you've rightly said, is that we take their interpretations and it's almost as if we're certain that these things are in Scripture when they're not. So I'll give you another one. How many angels fell at the fall of Satan? Proportionally.
Like a third of them.
A third of the angels fell. If I say, where does that come from? What do you say?
It's in Revelation.
Well, a third of the stars falling.
In Revelation.
But it occurs at the time of the birth of the Messiah, not the fall. And you have to reread it to say, are they the bad ones that fall? Or what is going on in that chapter? That's a plug for come to the book of Revelation.
That's a whole other thing when we do Revelation.
But actually where you get it from is Milton. Paradise Lost. Because what he does, he takes that in the book of Revelation, he interprets it that as being that's how the fall happened. And we are actually quoting Milton and not the Bible.
So that's another one where someone's interpretation becomes the Scripture. Let's move on to specifically, because I think we'll just touch on this one because I think it's important as well. We've talked about one world currency. But let's talk about the one world government.
I see no essential reason for there to be a one world government before the Antichrist. The Antichrist conquers. Well, if there's a one world government before the Antichrist, why does he need to conquer it?
He just needs to get promoted.
Yeah. And so you'll often find in conspiracy theories, and I did my master's on conspiracy theories, and the rabbit holes you really don't want to go down because they are terrifyingly complex and mess with your mind. But if you look nowadays, how many people believe there is a secret one world government? That the world is heading towards a one world government? That, you know, all this... Listen, governments are very, very poor at organising anything. You know, they can't organise the NHS. They can't organise it because it's grown to be something that it wasn't. And you can't now go back. It's like if you're caught in the middle of a car crash, you can't reinvent the engine. You just have to wait until it hits the brick wall. That's what governments are like. The idea that all the world governments can secretly get together and in a fortnight at the Bilderberg meetings, if you haven't come across them, don't get involved. But the secret one world government gets together once a year and tells people exactly what's going to happen, and all the governments politely go away and do it. Absolute nonsense. So don't expect a one world government before the end. The Antichrist will rise through conquest. That's what the scriptures say. But one world currency, one world government become slogans become sound bites and trigger responses, especially for Christians who perhaps have only read articles online and not the scriptures.
So that's just one of those ones where we need to be very careful. When we don't take interpretation. Some interpretation could be accurate.
Mm.
When you're dealing with prophecy, you don't know until it's happened. But some of it might not. So we need to be very careful it doesn't become scripture in our mind. I think that's very important when we're dealing with the end
I've heard
times.
some brilliant speakers over the years. I mean, some stellar, absolutely grip you in your seat speakers, and that we've just been open-mouthed at, and I didn't know that. Wow. None of it's come true. Found it very enjoyable and fun, and got me talking, and you know. And in my worst moments, I parroted some of the things that they said. Go figure.